Welcome back to Talking Trade. I'm Sandi Seigel, president of ME-Day.
And I'm Ian Coxhead at the University of Wisconsin-Madison. And today's guest is Rocío Rivera Barradas. Rocío is the Consul for Economic Affairs at the Consulate General for Mexico in Chicago, Illinois. And she has a special mandate to analyze trade dynamics between Illinois and Mexico. That's correct, Rocío?
Yes, that's correct.
Yeah, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
So I want to begin by talking about the general pattern of trade between Illinois, or maybe the upper Midwest, if your mandate extends that far, and Mexico. When we look at the data, we see a lot of two-way trade in manufacturers. So I guess that's a lot of trade in parts and components, especially machinery and electronics, going back and forth across the border. What can you tell us about the pattern of that trade and how is it evolving?
Yes, exactly. As you mentioned, the trade between Mexico and Illinois is pretty similar to what we see between Mexico and the US. And just to give you some figures, in 2019, the trade between Mexico and the US reached $612 billion US. This is huge for both countries. And if you take the exports of US to Mexico, you see that they are larger than US exports to China and Japan combined.
Right.
So the trade is really intense between the two countries. And this is similar between Mexico and Illinois. So if we take the 50 US states, we see that Illinois is the fourth trading partner of Mexico. In the first two places, we have what we call the usual suspects, Texas and California,
sure.
Of course, because of the size of their economy and because they share the border with Mexico. In third place, we have Michigan. And this is because of the auto industry. And in fourth place, Illinois. So in 2019, we traded around $22 billion between Mexico and Illinois. And this figure is bigger than what Mexico trades with Japan.
Really?
Yeah, so this shows you that Illinois by itself could be a country for Mexico. So it's pretty intense, the relationship. Mexico, for example, is the second export market of Illinois after Canada. So we are a very good client for Illinois.
And it's mostly machinery and electronics, is that correct?
Yes, although I have to say that it's very interesting when we analyze the exports and imports. In the case of exports from Illinois to Mexico, they are very diversified, but it's not the same case the other way around.
Right.
Because you are going to be very surprised about this figure. 30% of the imports of Illinois from Mexico is beer.
Yes, I saw that.
But yes, you are right. Most of the trade is on the auto industry, machinery, electronics, computers, televisions.
Right. I'm curious what your thoughts are in looking. Obviously, all of trade's been impacted by the pandemic, of course, and also by supply chain disruptions. And trading with China is so much more difficult, and the time delays due to, again, the pandemic and the supply chain. Do you think any of that trade has that difficulty in trading with China has impacted the trade with Mexico, and some of it has shifted? Are there any particular winners that have come out of the challenges we're having with Asia today?
Yes, definitely. We have been seeing a change in this dynamic related to the disruption of the supply chains with Asia. I would say that the losers from the pandemic was the auto industry. Also, in the case of the winners, one of the winners was the medical industry. For example, here in Illinois, we have Medline, and in Minnesota, Medtronic, And these two companies have a very important presence in Mexico. For example, Medline just opened a facility in Mexico, in Baja California, when we have a cluster of medical devices there. And we see, for example, that last year, this trade between Mexico and Illinois increased in almost 20%. So they were one of the winners.
So people in Chicago are still drinking lots of Modelo and Corona and Dos Equis, but the medical trade has also become much more important in the last couple of years, right? Yeah.
Yes.
What other effects has the pandemic had on this trade? What about, we hear a lot in this country about shortage of truck drivers, for example. Has that impacted the ability of Mexico to trade with Illinois?
Yes. Also, another impact that we have seen is that US companies are looking again to the South, are looking again to Mexico to relocate some of their processes. Just related to what Sandi was mentioned about China. We here at the consulate, we receive many questions and requests about finding suppliers in Mexico, also finding companies that can manufacture products that they used to buy from China. Now they want to buy it from Mexico, and they want to translate a process of their chain. Maybe not translate a full facility, a full company, but just looking into producing or making one process in Mexico.
Rocío, is there any other changes or negotiations, recent conversations between Mexico and the US in, trying to continue to get the momentum going? I know due to the pandemic, the USMCA, has fallen a little bit short of original hoped expectations because of all the challenges you just spoke to. Any recent developments or things we should watch for that are coming up?
Well, I think that one of the lessons that we got from the pandemic is that we cannot take for granted the fact that we are neighbors. Yeah. And I think that we saw that, especially with the auto industry, when the pandemic started in 2020, in the months of March, April, and May, we saw a huge impact in the disruption of the supply chains in this industry, because Canada and US established that the auto industry was going to be considered essential. And this was not the case in Mexico. So this, of course, had a huge impact in the industry. And as you know, this sector is the most integrated one in North America. So this made the governments to sit on the table and talk to each other. And I think that that's one of the lessons that we got from the pandemic, that we cannot take for granted the fact that we are neighbors. We need to talk among us every day. And also, I think that another challenge that we have is that we need to be able to disseminate the impacts of trade to the average citizen. I think that the pandemic just amplified or made more evident this challenge. So we need to be able to talk to them and see how they benefit every day from free trade. And this is something that we want to do here at the consulate. We, just to give you an example, took the case of the mangoes that come from Mexico. And we do some infographics and share them in our social media to show you, for example, Mexico is the second exporter of mangoes globally after Thailand.
Yeah.
And in the case of Illinois, 25% of the imports of mangoes come from Mexico. So when you go to the supermarket and you see the mangoes, 1 out of 4 comes from Mexico. And then you will be able to enjoy mangonadas or your favorite dessert with mango.
Fabulous.
Yeah, this is something that we try to do.
Well, and I would agree. I think, connecting it for people is important and making it relevant. So hopefully additional trade with Mexico is one of the benefits or positives that come out of some of these other supply chain challenges. So interesting perspective. Rocío, thank you so much for joining us today. Again, I hope we can look forward to promoting trade with Mexico and thank you for your work that you're doing here in the Midwest.
Thank you, Sandi.
Thanks for joining us on Talking Trade.
Good to meet you, Rocío. Thank you.
Thanks, Ian.
Bye-bye.
Bye.